Hello, and welcome to Alright Already! Gamification that's not the samification. My name is Rob MacGregor. I'm an English instructional coach at Taylor High School in Katy ISD. I played these games in my classroom for about 13 or 14 years to help get my students a little more engaged in why the right answers are the right answers. And I'm going to go ahead and apologize at this point that I am not very good at PowerPoint and my slides are not so beautiful. Hopefully the games make up for it, but we'll see. Why are you here? Why are we here? Why is anyone here? Well, first of all, hopefully we're going to find a way to get our students a little more engaged in learning in the classroom, having a little more fun, making it so class time is both memorable and fast. The next part is that we're going to make use of the most valuable resource you have as an educator, and that's the fact that you have locked in a classroom students with other students their own age. They want to talk to them. They want to seem smart to them, they want to impress them, and they also want to learn from them. They want to learn from them more than they want to learn from us. This game invites a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, a lot of peer pressure, and that helps the students really get the lessons down. Next step is we're going to make it so that students are aware of exactly how much time can affect them when they're working towards a high-stakes test like an SAT or an AP test or a STAR test where time is a factor. And we're going to make it so that they are planning out their time carefully and watching exactly how much time they have remaining. For you, it gives you an opportunity to be the master of ceremonies, make it fun, be the inner Bob Barker that you've always wanted to be, and have a lot of fun with your students while you're doing it. And we also get to teach the students on how to get to the right answers, and so that next time they're looking at a multiple choice question, they know not to be fooled by certain distractors because they've practiced it in class. But also they get to justify their answers. They're going to have all sorts of evidence that they can pull from and explain why that evidence proves their point. That sounds like the kind of thing they're going to have to do in a lot of essays too, doesn't it? Yeah. The other idea is hopefully this is fun. Fun for you, fun for them, fun to make the day go by quickly. And it's definitely one of those experiences when I run into old students, they always bring up how much they enjoyed playing games in the class. So what will this entail today besides you sitting here and watching this poorly put together PowerPoint, trying to figure out exactly what this thing is above my head? Yeah. What I'm going to hit is the what's, the general format of these games, and a lot of them follow the same kind of structure. The why is it that I make certain decisions in these games and make it play a certain way? A lot of those are learned through trial and error that you guys get to skip right past the error and go straight to the trial. The hows, I'll teach you how to play 5 different games so you can change up the format for the kids. There's multiple voice, there's hot seat, there's alright already. And there's recess of elimination and indirect quotes. So the idea right here is with 5 multiple games, you'll have lots to pull from. And I'll also give you a few more tips from my scars so you can skip right over those errors and go straight to the trials. I almost said it the wrong way. All right. These are the necessary components that you'll need in your classroom. You'll need some multiple choice analytical questions. Okay, now these have got to be a higher level question. Maybe some released AP questions or applied practice. Could be some STAR questions or some SAT questions, but what you want are questions that are about analysis, not recall. Don't tell me what happened in a book or anything like that. Instead, it's got to be something where you're analyzing and comprehending a passage. And then you want to make sure that it's got solid distractors, something that other people would definitely want to argue. So you want to make sure those are nice and solid. We got to give the students some individual work time to take care of this. Make sure that you're giving them plenty of class time the day before to get all their answers and explanations written out, or give it to them for some homework if those are the types of students who actually go home and do work. In the class where you're presenting, you're going to want a document camera to present up what the questions and examples and answers are. And if you don't have that, you could still play it, of course, but it just helps so much for the students who want to read along with what the students wrote down. That'll make more sense as we go on. You're going to have a little scoreboard where you keep track of what answers the students got and how many tallies they end up getting towards their score, and also a timer to make sure that they understand exactly how much class time they have left. You may have heard me talking about scores and tallies. I'll explain all of that in just a second, but it's because we want to make sure it stays separate from the grade overall, which is going to come from the answer sheets, the most important component to any of these games. This is what it looks like. You'll notice that on the answer sheet, there's a section where the students can put the answers. That's going to be the multiple choice A through E or whatever. Then they get to put how sure they are on a 1 through 10. Sometimes having a student stress that they are 10 sure on something can be kind of a motivator for other students when they hear that. The explanation part is the most important part, where they explain why the right answers are the right answers and sometimes why the wrong answers are the wrong answers. And then also I put on here type of question. This is something that it's not necessary, but sometimes it's good to make them think about exactly what type of question they're maybe having trouble with again and again. I gave them a few examples down here, but you can make it fit for whatever it is that you're using. And as far as the basics of how the games run, first of all, you'll assign the work. You give them passage, the questions, the answer sheets, and lots of time. And then the day of the game, you collect those sheets up. The students will keep the passage and the questions at their desk, but you're going to pick up the answer sheets and use those as you play the game. For the competition, what will happen is I'll reread the question, I'll reread all of the multiple choice selections, and then I will choose a random sheet and open the question up to discussion. When I choose that random sheet, I'm reading their answer explanation, and I'm kind of saying, like, do we agree with this? Of course, we need to watch the time as they're doing that. They're going to decide on whether or not that vote is the right one. They'll debate it out. Once we determine the class answer, we'll move to the next question. Eventually, at the end, I'll tell them that these are the results for you, and these are the reasons why the right answers were the right answers. And boy, that's such an important part, to really explain to them exactly why the right answer was the right answer. If you don't feel comfortable with why the right answer is the right answer before you start playing, go back, stop, figure it out for yourself, because otherwise, you're going to hear some really good explanations from the kids, and you might get distracted by that. It's good for you to know the actual reasons. That's where something like applied practice or released AP tests are great, because there are a lot of answer explanations out there for them. Then you'll determine their score, and what the students will see is how many tallies they were able to get as a class. And then you're going to grade their answer sheets after class, or whenever you actually find time for grading. And you have to make sure that you hide the score so the next class can't see it. I'll come back to that later on. But all this grade and score stuff, let me explain it because I know it gets confusing. The grades are what's going to go in the grade book, right? And we're going to refer to those as points because they're used to hearing about their points for grades. Now, score, that's what determines which class is the winner. I like to have my classes compete against each other, and so I don't want to keep referring to it as points because students get confused on whether they're talking about their grade or the score. So I'll use something like tallies or meow meow beans or whatever, and I'll say, oh, congratulations, you got 5 purple buffaloes. Congratulations. Something silly that makes it so that the game itself is pretty light, even though there is something that becomes a grade. Now, as far as grading suggestions go, my suggestion is that you make this a lower stakes grade, maybe like a daily grade, but make it so that they can get above 100%, because on a lot of these higher level multiple choice questions, we don't expect them to get 100%. So if they do, give them up to 110 or 105, whatever you feel comfortable with. Sometimes those little extra bonus points really inspire some students to work a little bit harder for that. What we do is we take how they do on their sheet individually and then the answers that they choose as a class at the end, and we average those scores together, much like my fingers are interlocking to become one. And what's nice about that is it can help a student's grade who is struggling with the assignments but kind of came to understand everything during the game. But it can also hurt those students who really understood everything but didn't try to convince the class that they were right. And so the class chose something wrong, and guess what? Their grade went down a little bit. Oh dear. What can really kill the grades is if they have bad explanations for why the right answers are the right answers. So what I like to do is I average the individual students in with the class one, and once I've got that together, that's when I subtract all of those grades for the missing explanations or bad explanations. I really just amused myself with my hand signals. This is what an example sheet would look like when it's all filled out. You see that our student right here is given some pretty thorough explanations. Now, while we don't have the questions in front of us, when you're actually grading these, you'll know those pretty well. You can look at those and kind of say, look, I can see that this student's really trying to explain things. Up at the top, I like to put like a little spot where they can just write in something random, just as a chance to get the students to feel a little more, I don't know, silly and engaged. When it comes down to grading something like this, I would look through the explanations and see that they looked pretty good. And it would be something where I would give them credit for all the answers that were right, and then I knew I wouldn't have to take any points off for their explanations. So then we have another sheet right here, and this person did not do such a good job with the explanations. You can see them putting process of elimination as far as what led them to that right answer. That doesn't help anybody when it's on there. So that's not going to work for us. And then if you look at the second one, the porter's requesting money, well, that sounds like it could be, but if I knew the question was the porter is requesting what, then I'd see that this answer is just restating the answer and is not going to help anyone get to the right point. So this student would not do so well. They would maybe get all the answers right, but then they would lose a lot of points for their explanation. Generally, that's where my students struggled. Okay, they could have trouble with the multiple choice section, but if they attempted their explanations and I could see that they had really put some thought into it and they tried to explain those thoughts, they were going to get credit for that. What ended up happening the most is students who rushed it with the explanations ended up really hurting their grades. So when I was actually grading this, and I know this is going to be confusing, there are like 7 questions on this, and I generally try to keep these pretty short for their multiple choice because we only have so much class time. And it's kind of similar to what you're going to see on like an AP test, where you'll have passages and maybe 8 to 9 questions tops on each passage. So what I do is I say I want 105 to be the highest, I want 50 to be the lowest, and so it's 55 points. There's 7 questions. With math, that's about 8 points per question, and I'll just leave it at that. All right, so that way really what I'm starting with is 105 and I'm subtracting for everything they get wrong. This person got all of them right. That's great. Their individual answers were 7 out of 7, 105. And then their class went through and they debated, but their class didn't get number 36 correct, but still, that's a 97. And with a 97 and 105 combined, an average, you get 101. That's pretty great. Now I have to look at their explanations. And remember that their explanations are just hot garbage. So what I did is I subtracted the same amount of points for each one of the explanations that were wrong. 8 times 7 is 56. That gives them a 45 overall. That's not good, and they won't be happy with themselves. Even if they got everything right and the class got everything right, if they didn't have good explanations, they were going to fail. The explanations are the most important part, and also really this is a writing assignment. So I apologize for all the math so far. I'll try to hold back on making it look so complicated, but I promise you it's really not too bad to average those together and then subtract for the wrong explanations. All right, now as far as why I like to do it like this, as far as why I do class competition, where I have one class period versus another class period, I don't want to split classes against each other because then it gets really heated and into a pretty intense debate and people start removing earrings. We don't want that. But the other thing I don't want is I don't want kids cheating. I'm so sick of what I taught my first period being given to my second period class in all the answer keys. So when I have classes against each other, that answer sharing goes away. They'll hear what the right answers are, but they can't share it with the others because they're in competition with them. It also encourages peer-to-peer teaching because everybody's on the same page in that class. They're all working towards each other, and so they want to learn from each other because they've got something to prove together. Another nice thing about this game is it really allows someone to get in the spotlight. Everybody's allowed a chance to say why they think a certain answer is a certain answer in most of these games, and that gives some students moments to shine. I always think about this girl who was pretty quiet in class, didn't really show off her intelligence very much, and she was quiet through most of a game before finally the whole class was debating whether it was C or E, and she raised her hand and she said why she thinks answer choice E was the correct one, and the way she saw it was something that nobody else had noticed, and they all agreed with her. The answer was right, the class won, and that girl was turned to more often for the rest of the year. Nice story, isn't it? And the other thing about this is there's nowhere to hide with that spotlight. It can very quickly become a searchlight. And if you've got someone who's trying not to be engaged, trying not to vote, you get to stop the game and say, oh, hold on. Reginald hasn't made a choice yet. We should really ask Reginald exactly what he thinks and put the searchlight on him until he's a little more involved. The other thing about this is it has an escape room feel where you have all the clues are in front of you. The passages are in people's hands so they can keep looking through. Maybe they've chosen an answer before that now they look closely and they see something else and they want to change their answer. That's what it's all about, is that idea of let me look again, let me see what else I can find out, let me try it, looking at it a different way. And that gives us that answer of how it's correct, right? Where now students understand exactly how to follow down that path in the future with this similar questions so they can get to the right answer. The other piece that can motivate people is the grade, where the idea is for those people who are sitting there and they know everything and they've got all the answers right, they don't want someone to bring their grade down. They need to express exactly how it is that they got to that right answer. Same thing for those kids who didn't know what was going on. They're motivated to actually learn what's going on so they can be part of the class vote and vote the right way. So they can stay engaged and hopefully raise up their grade, knowing that their individual grade and the class grade will be averaged together. And of course, the other thing is that it should be fun. We're trying to be silly. We're having silly rules in these games and there are silly rewards. So that should help, right? Some of the rewards I've used in the past, what I've said is, okay, at the end of the semester, whichever class has won the most games, everybody's going to get a Happy Meal toy or a ribbon or a Crazy Straw, something like that. I was able to get a whole lot of Happy Meal toys at Goodwill for very little money in like a big tub. And boy, my students loved those and championed those and showed those off for the rest of the day. So a little silly trinkets can end up being something that motivates a kid way more than a grade. All right, now let's talk about the different games. We'll talk about multiple voice, which is very easy to understand and a great introduction to this. We've got hot seat, which is a little bit sillier and involves a lot of peer pressure to get someone to choose the right answer. Then all right already, which is super silly and also encourages students to work on their writing to make sure that their explanations are succinct and powerful. It's a bit more complicated though. Then we have recess of elimination, which actually moves the kids outside of the class. Boy, they love that. Anytime you say the word recess, they get so excited. And it encourages those students to stick to their guns who feel like the class is kind of not seeing everything that they need to see, but they can't somehow motivate them. This gives them a chance to hold on to the answers that they think are right, and find success with them. And then there's indirect quotes, and in that one, it encourages thorough written explanations. Unfortunately, that one has a little bit less debates, but it does strengthen the writing process quite a bit. All right, let's talk about how to play multiple voice, a very simple game. You take up their answer sheets, and then you read a question, and you choose their answer. You read the question and all of the multiple choice selections, and then you read what they wrote down for their explanation. And then you ask the writer if they need to elaborate anything else, if there's something else they wanted to add. You ask if anyone disagrees. If nobody disagrees, that's our class answer. We move on to the next question. If the class does want to discuss it a little bit more, we call on raised hands. We begin a discussion. We wait till that discussion kind of wraps up and you say like, okay, do y'all want to vote on which answer we want to use? We take a vote and it has to be the majority. If you're choosing between three answers, which often happens, one of them has to have over 50% or it's back to the debate. Once it's answered, you're going on to the next question, and you have to keep an eye on that time limit. You have to make sure that those discussions and debates don't go too long. At the very end, you make sure that you explain all of the answers out and make sure that the students understand why the right answers were the right answers. And it gives you a chance to commend those students who said something where you're like, Reginald had it perfect. All right. The number right that they came up with as a class ends up becoming their score. And any unanswered questions, because they ran out of time, are just counted wrong. So that will hopefully get them better at watching the time. So that in the future they can play a more fun game like hot seat. Hot seat, you take up those answer sheets and you ask for a volunteer. You choose someone at random. You wait for that one kid if you want that kind of pressure. And then you put them in the hot seat in the center of the room. You give them some kind of noise maker. It could be a kazoo, could be an accordion, could be a buzzer, whatever it is. And then you're going to read the question, and then you'll read hot seat's answer and explanation. You can put that up on the document camera so they can see. Now, you ask students if they want to try and peer pressure hot seat with your own explanations. And hot seat will listen, but when hot seat has made a decision, they make their noise, and they say, I've made my final decision, and that gets written onto the board. And you move through all the questions like that, and of course you still have to worry about the time limit, but on this one, the time limit is much more the concern of the kid in the hot seat. They've got to keep an eye on the time. At the end, I asked the whole class if they would like to overrule one of Hot Seat's answers, because there's some hot seats that just want to watch everything burn. It has to be a majority to reopen one. We can debate it out and make a decision. And then we read the answers out. We explain why the right answers were the right answers. And once again, the numbers right are the score. Simple games, hot seat, so much more fun than multiple voice, but multiple voice is a great way to introduce them to these kinds of games. Let me get to move on to all right already, which is my favorites, not just because of the name. You're going to take up the answer sheets, and then you're going to create a scoreboard with question numbers in 2 other columns. You'll notice my beautifully drawn scoreboard right over here that actually mirrors exactly what it would look like if I was writing on a whiteboard. And I'll explain what the 2 columns are all about, but essentially with this game, you can either get 2 tallies or 1 tally based on when you decide what the right answer is. So you'd read the question, then you'd choose one of the random answers and explanations from a student's sheet, and then you'd ask the students, hey, is that all right, as in the whole thing sounds perfect, or as in, it's all right, you know, it's kind of okay. The students respond as a group with hand signals and noises, this way for all right, and this way for all right. And then the students whose answer was read decides if the majority thought it was all right or all right. So let's say I read Reginald's paper, and then I ask Reginald, all right, is that all right or is it all right? If Reginald decides that it's all right, Reginald doubles down, maybe smacks the desk to emphasize it and says, that's the answer, write it down on the board, and that will get written down in the first column. If Reginald realizes that perhaps his answer was not the best, he'll say, all right. And then the students will open up the question for some discussion. So when that discussion begins, I'll ask, well, who will write something else? To which a student has to respond with, I'll write answer choice C or whatever, and then explain why. So we keep doing this and debating on exactly which answer choices should be until the class has kind of made up their mind and they can read the room and basically decide, okay, I think we've got it. We're not going to sway anybody else. And they yell out, all right already. I need to hear it from the majority of the room. So pretty quickly you'll get some students who say it. I'm like, well, that didn't sound like enough. That usually gets everybody to chime in. And once that's done, we vote, and a majority's answer is put in the second column. Now, the second column is going to be worth a little bit less because it wasn't, we weren't convincing anyone with our writing. We had to really open it up for debates. Then we move on to the next question, and so on and so forth. As usual, we have to watch the time. Now, to get a little bit more complicated at the end, when I read out the answers and the explanations, I have to determine the score. Those that were in the first column, all right, that were doubled down on, they can get 2 tallies, while the correct answers that were all right got discussed were with 1 tally, and then missing and incorrect answers get no tallies. All right, so on this one right here, you can see that they were able to get 2 rights in each category. So 2 right in the first column, those are worth 2 points apiece. That's 4 points. And 2 right in the second column, only worth 1, I said points, 1 tally a piece, and so becomes worth 6 tallies. That's how we'd get their score and open up for competition with other classes. That's 2 down, 3 games left, and I just wanted to really highlight how beautiful my 3 is when I draw on a PowerPoint. All right, next game is Recess of Elimination. This is a mix of multiple voice and also 4 corners, which a lot of you have probably played in your class before. So you're going to take up the answer sheet, you're going to create a standard scoreboard, and you'll basically play multiple voice with the questions, reminding students that we need 10 minutes at the end to go outside and do recess. Encourage students to take notes on their chosen answers on their question sheets. Remember that you have their sheets. So at the end of class, after we've written down all of the class's answers, we're going to take questions to a location outside the room. You can go outside, that's great. If not, you can find some spot in the hallway, wherever, and you're basically going to play 4 corners there. You'll designate locations as multiple choice letters and as the mush pot. So here we have like the tree, it's where you'd go stand if you had answer choice A, that pillar for B, that flagpole for C, that pillar for D, that tree over there in the middle of the bed for E, and otherwise you're going to go stand in the street for mush pot. Don't make kids stand in the street. Sorry. All right, then you're going to go outside. You'll reread each question and the answer choices. You'll remind them what they chose up in the classroom. And you say, okay, if you think it's answer choice A, go there. This gets a little frantic trying to get everything in on time, but when the students are standing next to their stations, then you read out the answer and the explanation, and the students who are in the wrong spots, they have to go to the mush pot. They're eliminated. They can try to sway the survivors to make sure that they make it through the whole recess of elimination. Then you're going to repeat that for each of the questions, and at the end you count how many students have survived the recess of elimination. Scoring on this one, a class is going to get 1 tally for each right answer and bonus tallies for how many tenths of the class survived the recess of elimination. I apologize for the math. For instance, if 6 students out of a class of 30 survived, then that would be 2/10 of the class. So that class would get 2 bonus tallies added to the tallies for how many they made up in their classroom. So for a scoring example, here's Class A, here's Class B. Class A, oh boy, they missed 2 up in the classroom. Class B also missed 2. However, when they went outside, there were 6 survivors in Class A out of a class of 28. Now that's about 2/10 that survived, so that 2 plus the number correct 3 gives them 5 tallies. Meanwhile, in Class B, oh, look at that. They got the exact same number right. They had the exact same number of survivors. However, the class is a lot smaller. It's 15 students. So we had 4/10 survive on that one, which gives them 4 tallies plus the 3 tallies for correct, and they get 7 tallies. And so Class B wins because basically a higher percentage of their students survived the recess of elimination. A little complicated, I know, but again, students really enjoyed this game a lot. They did not enjoy indirect quotes very much. I'll explain why. It's a writing-heavy game. It's less fun. And there's a different answer sheet. You'll notice on the front down here, it has a spot for what answer you answer on the back. And then over here, this is the explanation for question number is a big box, and they have to write out thoroughly what the answer is and why it's the right answer. I've had some students who go through all of the different letters and they make sure that they explain why each answer is incorrect. Down at the bottom of the page, I have the shout out section. This is where they can respond to anyone else in the class. Just give them a little shout out just to make it a little bit more fun, because like I said, this is not the most fun game. All right, to play the game, they'd answer all the questions, and on the back, they choose one question to answer in super depth. And what you want to do is have them talk as a class and say, hey, does someone have a thorough answer for answer choice, or for question 6? We got to make sure we get all of them covered. So then I'm going to collect the answer sheets and I'll organize them by number, the number answered in depth. So basically here's the question 1 where it's all in detail, and then here's the question 2, and so on and so forth. Then I'm going to create a 4-column score sheet, kind of like all right, alrighties, but with one more column. And then I'm going to read the question, the choices, and the entire detailed answer aloud for each question, including the shout outs if it's school appropriate. So then I'll ask a student afterwards, well, did you like the answer? And if the students really like it, they go, However, if they don't like it, kids will respond with, like that. If the majority likes it, we'll put it into the first column. It's worth the possible 3 tallies and move on to the next question. But if the majority doesn't like it, then we're going to see if there's another example we can read. If there are 2 students that answered question number 1 in detail, I'll read the second one, and then I'll read it and read the shout outs and see how they like that new answer and take a vote again. If they agree on that one, they can put it in the second column, and it's now worth a possible 2 tallies. The majority still doesn't like the answer, then we open it up for debates, and after the students have argued, we'll take that vote for the final answer, and that's where it goes in the third column. So the third column is where it's going to be worth just 1 tally. Go through all the questions. Don't forget to remind the students about the time limit. So we're going to determine the score based on a similar system as all right, where the first column is now worth 3, the second column is worth 2, and the third column is worth 1. On this one, you can see we got 1 right in each, so the first column gets us 3 tallies. Second column gets us 2 tallies, and the third column gets us 1 tally, giving us 6 tallies. Okay? So a little more complicated with the scoring, and the reason why is just to make this game a little more intense, because basically the goal is to make it so debate doesn't even really enter into this. It becomes a non-issue because the students are writing so much. So that's all 5 games. As far as what now to think about, it's difficult remembering tallies versus points. I think you've heard me mess that up several times if you were paying attention at all to me and not like the toaster in the background of this picture. So the reason why is grades are serious business, right? Points are serious business. We want the scores in the class competition to just be as silly as it possibly can be. I always make up stories about the other classes, talking bad about one class's grandmother or whatnot and how they're going to destroy them at the game, just to keep it silly. However, at the end of the day, you ask them, they say, no, we should just double down on this answer and move on. You say, like, hey, your grade depends on y'all getting these answers right. Your score is based on how quickly you get there. So that silly versus serious combo really helps make these successful. It has to be organized chaos. That means making sure that the students understand what the rules are before you start playing. I know it's complicated. That's why multiple voice ends up being a great intro into this. You're sure of the rules. You're making sure they stay by the rules. And that way the chaos stays mostly organized, which is just what appraisers love to see. There has to be some prep work. They have to know the material very well. They have to put the time into it. That's difficult. But also you have to make sure that you really understand why the right answers are the right answers. You're the experts, so you need to put the little time into it to make sure that you have it all ready to go. You also want to make sure that you have your scoreboards clean and ready to go and basically all set up to play the game as efficiently as possible. You have to make sure everybody plays. Don't let those kids just check out of voting. Call them out. Make sure that they get involved. Ask them to explain things. Ask them what they're confused about if they're not voting. Basically, make sure that they are invested in what they're doing because it's a lively classroom. You have that chance to get them involved. Now, if there is a kid who decides to do a little bit of cheating on this, that spotlight that they're standing in can very quickly become a searchlight where you are calling them out for having an answer with no explanation. And if they're like, I just know it's right, I just know it's right, that's when you really get to bring up how unimportant it is to have a right answer if you don't have the justification behind it, and really single out your cheater in front of the whole class with a little lesson on why the journey is a little more important than the destination, and hopefully shut them down and make it so that they understand that's not going to have a place in your room. But I've also told the class, once a student has said, like, well, I know the right answers or something like that, I'm like, okay, well, this answer is not going to count for your score. And we'll move on from there. A big part of this, again, is building up that class competition with each other, keeping a tally of how many games each class has won, using it as an opportunity to do a little smack talk. Just keeping it silly and making it so they're all in it together versus the other class. Because of that, sometimes if a student comes in there and they can still see the scores up on the board from the class before, first of all, they might see the right answers, but also they might see, oh, wait, the only way we're going to be able to win this is if we double down or we triple down or whatever to get as many points as possible. We don't want tallies as possible. We don't want them thinking through the game like that. We want them instead working on finding the right answers as quickly as possible, not trying to go all in for getting the score. And that's where a nice reminder is your grade depends on y'all getting it right. Make sure you have some silly prizes because really that just motivates the kids so much and keeps the game nice and light. You need to have the poker face where you don't give any information out to everybody. Sometimes I would sum up the argument a student had just made, but I would never try and bring in my thoughts on it or guide them towards the right answer. I have the end of the game to do that, and they're going to be pretty invested in it at that point. During the game, they have no idea which side I stand on. Make sure that that explanation does get through to them. Again, you understanding why the right answers are the right answers, you need to be able to back it up. Sometimes we get frustrated with these questions and we don't 100% understand them ourselves. Keep working until you do. Ask a partner, whatever it takes to make sure that you have a clear explanation for them. When you are reading out the questions, I realize that I'm establishing what students will hear when they're actually reading multiple choice questions on an SAT or an AP test. So whenever there's a question that says all of the following except, I emphasize that except so much, so loudly, because that's the kind of thing a student misses when they're actually taking the test, and they assume that they're looking for one example instead of one non-example. So I yell except, I yell all none or not, and that helps hopefully get my voice into their head when it's actually time for the test. And then there's also the students just appreciate the effort you're doing to bring this kind of game into the classroom. I'll never forget the time when I first year, the student Mark started doing a slow clap when I introduced him to this ridiculous game I had for teaching Canterbury Tales. And he just, appreciated my efforts, and the whole class got behind on it. It's probably one of my favorite moments as a teacher. So putting that effort into the ridiculous games, going all in, they do appreciate it. Now, as far as why having a variety of the games, changing out which game you might play, I think that Price is Right would get a little boring if it was always Plinko. Instead, you never know exactly which game you're going to play, and when Plinko comes out there, it's pretty exciting. And why make the students say all right and all right and all that good stuff? Silly noises and silly voices, they really just help make it a little more fun. I think about in Jeopardy, how people have to answer in the form of a question, or that's too much, you have to yell that's too much, and Price is Right. It just adds to the silliness. So as far as what's next, there are lots of variations that I have for some of these games. What you can do is you can take away all the multiple choice selections and give them just the questions and have them kind of diagnose, like go through and sort out what the right answer would have to look like before they actually see the multiple choices on a quiz, and give them that as like a cold test. You can also have a Plinko board where every right tally that they've collected, they can use that to get a certain number of points. If you feel like going out there and getting yourself a Plinko board, which, who doesn't? The number correct at the end of class, I can say, well, you've got 5 of the 7 correct. Are there 2 that you think you want to change? And have them kind of open up to debates, maybe something that they were not looking carefully about. And also with Hot Seat and with other games, sometimes I'll play Millionaire Rules where they can phone a friend, they can get a 50-50 shot, and they can only use those once. And if they don't use any of those little bonus rules, they can turn them into tallies at the end of the game. Lots of ideas. Another thing is I like to do an MVP award at the end of the semester, even for those classes where they didn't end up winning first place. I'll say, well, you can choose one person that you feel like brought the most to the arguments and single them out and maybe give them a toy as well. And if you have any other ideas, I have a website right here, bit.ly/MacGGames. And that way you can kind of contribute those to there, and I'll just start building that up. It's got all the rules for all of these games in a little more detail and some sample answer sheets and everything, so you can utilize that however you'd like. All right, so thank you so much for attending. If you have any questions, there is my email address. And I really appreciate you guys suffering through my beautiful PowerPoints and my beautiful drawings. Thanks so much, and have a good one.